I've been married to my husband, Robert, for the past 7 years, and together we have a beautiful son who means the world to us. Robert and I have shared so much over the years, but our journey began in a way that I'll never forget. We met when I was working at my old company, and he was my manager at the time. From the very beginning, there was something about him that stood out to me. He had this natural charm and a warmth that made him incredibly easy to talk to. He was always so helpful and considerate, not just with me, but with everyone around him. As I got to know Robert better, I found myself drawn to him in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just his kindness that captivated me, though that was a huge part of it. It was also the way he made me feel valued and understood. He had this ability to make even the most ordinary moments feel special, and it wasn't long before I realized I was slowly falling in love with him. We started spending more and more time together outside of work, and as we did, my feelings for him only grew stronger. Fortunately, one day he asked me out and I immediately said yes. Eventually, when I entered into a relationship with Robert, I did so without any expectations. I wasn't looking for anything long-lasting in particular, and I certainly didn't have any grand plans in mind. I just knew that I enjoyed being with him and that he made me happy in a way that no one else had before. I felt like we had a deep connection, one that was built on mutual respect, shared values, and a genuine affection for one another. It all felt so natural, like we were meant to be together. And I often found myself thinking that this was how it was supposed to be. Robert and I come from very different family backgrounds, and this has shaped our relationship in unique ways. While I grew up in a relatively privileged environment with loving parents who provided for all my needs, Robert's upbringing was far more challenging. His father was largely absent from his life, and his mother, unfortunately, depended heavily on him, especially financially. She didn't have a job or any savings, and as Robert was her only child, the responsibility of supporting her fell squarely on his shoulders from a very early age. She often pressured him for money, and if he didn't comply, she would resort to yelling or guilt-tripping him. Robert was very frank about his situation to me right from the start. However, I did not know the exact magnitude of how much he helped out his mother financially until we started living together. When Robert and I decided to take the next step in our relationship and move in together, I offered to have him move into my place since it was larger and more comfortable for both of us. Initially, we agreed to split the bills evenly. However, as time passed, I noticed that Robert was often struggling financially. He would frequently complain about his bank account being nearly empty, and there were times when he couldn't even afford basic things like groceries or gas. When I asked him about it, Robert explained that most of his money was going towards helping his mother. Although I understood that he felt a deep sense of duty towards her, I couldn't help but feel frustrated. It was difficult to watch him struggle, especially when I knew that he was capable of managing his finances more effectively, if not for the constant demands from his mother. Realizing that this situation wasn't sustainable, I suggested we change our financial arrangement. I proposed that we shift the split in our shared expenses so that I could cover 70% of the rent and bills, while Robert would only be responsible for 30%. This way, he would have more money left over for himself, even after sending some to his mother. I hoped this would relieve some of the pressure he was under and allow him to enjoy life a bit more without constantly worrying about his finances. To my relief, this arrangement worked out well for us. It brought a sense of balance to our relationship and eased some of the tension that had been building up around money. Robert was able to continue supporting his mother without feeling completely drained, and our home life became more peaceful as a result. This solution has been in place ever since and has certainly made things more manageable for both of us. When I first found out I was pregnant with our son, Mark, I was filled with a mix of emotions. Part of me was thrilled at the thought of becoming a mother, but another part of me was nervous about how Robert would react. Given his background and the financial pressures he was already facing, I feared that the news might overwhelm him. I imagined he might be hesitant or even against the idea, worried about the added responsibilities, challenges that come with raising a child. To my surprise, though, Robert's reaction was the complete opposite. When I told him about the pregnancy, his face lit up with joy. He was ecstatic, far more excited than I had anticipated. In fact, he quickly proposed to me after that, wanting us to be married before our son entered the world. His enthusiasm and eagerness to build our family together filled me with a sense of security and happiness, and we were married soon after. Since the day Mark was born, Robert has been an incredibly attentive and devoted father. It's been heartwarming to watch him embrace fatherhood with such enthusiasm and love. He's always made it a priority to be there for our son, whether it's reading him bedtime stories, playing basketball with him every weekend, or sitting down to help him with his homework. Robert has also never missed any of Mark's school matches, always showing up to cheer him on and support him in every way possible. Watching Robert in this role has deepened my love for him in ways I never could have imagined when I first started dating him. Seeing how he interacts with our son, the care and attention he gives him, and the bond they share has only made me appreciate him even more. Up until very recently, I always believed that Robert and I would grow old together, sharing a lifetime of memories and experiences. We had often talked about our future plans, how we would retire someday, travel the world, exploring new places and cultures hand in hand. So you can imagine my utter shock and disbelief when I stumbled upon my husband's double life suddenly one day. To give you some context, both Robert and I have jobs that allow us the flexibility to work from home most days. Robert has his desk job up in our spare room, which he calls his work room. It's a neat and organized space equipped with all the essentials he needs for his job. A large desk, multiple monitors and shelves lined with files and documents. He takes his work very seriously, especially since he handles confidential information. And because of this, he had even installed a lock on the door to his workroom to ensure that sensitive documents and data remain secure. I completely understood and respected this need for privacy and security, especially with a curious young son in the house. I never thought to question it or felt the need to invade his workspace. I remember the day I found the phone vividly. Robert had gone out for a quick errand and Mark was taking a nap. I was tidying up around the house when I noticed that Robert had accidentally left his workroom door slightly ajar. Normally, it was always locked when he wasn't inside, so I decided to take this opportunity to clean his room since I knew he would have empty cans or wrappers strewn on the floor. As I was straightening out some papers on his desk, I noticed a drawer at the bottom of the desk that was slightly open. I was about to close the drawer when I saw something shiny inside. I pulled it open to see that it was a phone that I had never seen before. Curious, I looked at the phone and noticed that it was switched off. My mind raced with possibilities. Why did he have a second phone? Was it for work? But then why hide it? I felt a knot forming in my stomach as I picked up the phone, contemplating whether or not to unlock it and see what secrets it held. Part of me wanted to respect his privacy, but another part needed answers. This was so out of character for Robert, and I needed to understand what was going on. I decided to switch on the phone and check for myself. I decided to turn on the phone and see for myself what was going on. As soon as the screen lit up, the phone began vibrating non-stop, and message after message started flooding in. My heart raced as I stared at the screen, my hands trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief. The first thing that caught my eye were the notifications, multiple messages from an unknown number. What struck me immediately was the way this person was addressing my husband. The messages referred to Robert as her boyfriend, a term that sent a shockwave of confusion and horror through me. As I continued to read, I realized it was a woman on the other end of these messages, and she seemed to have a deep personal connection with Robert, one that I had never known about. She wrote about how much she was looking forward to seeing him next week and mentioned that her daughter was excited to see her papa. When I read the word papa, it felt like the ground beneath me was slipping away. My legs nearly gave out from under me as the realization began to sink in. This woman was talking about my husband as if he were the father of her child. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what all of this meant. Robert had never mentioned this woman to me. The more I read, the more my dread grew, and I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. Desperately needing to know more, I tried to unlock the phone to dig deeper into the messages, but I didn't know the passcode. The sense of helplessness in that moment was overwhelming. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room in a fit of anger and betrayal, but I knew I had to keep my emotions in check. If I destroyed the phone or confronted Robert without knowing the full story, I might lose the chance to uncover the truth. Taking a deep breath, I realized that I needed to be strategic. I quickly grabbed my own phone and started taking photos of the messages on the screen. I captured as much as I could, knowing that these images might be the key to finding out who this woman was and what was really going on. I needed to know who she was, how long this had been going on for, and most importantly, why Robert had kept such a monumental secret from me. Once I had taken all the photos, I carefully placed the phone back in the drawer, exactly as I had found it. My hands were still shaking as I made sure everything looked untouched. The last thing I wanted was for Robert to suspect that I had found his hidden phone. I knew I had to play it cool, to act as if nothing had changed, even though my world had just been turned upside down. As I closed the drawer and stepped out of the workroom, a flood of emotions washed over me. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and heartbreak all at once. But amidst all of that, there was also a determination to get to the bottom of this, to uncover the truth about who this woman was and what kind of life Robert had been leading behind my back. My mind was already racing with plans to find out more about the number and the person behind those messages. I knew that confronting Robert could wait until I had all the pieces of the puzzle in place. Until then, I had to keep my emotions in check and continue acting as if everything was normal, even though my heart was breaking inside. I decided not to touch anything in Robert's workroom, leaving everything exactly as it was so that he wouldn't suspect a thing. The last thing I wanted was to raise any alarms or give him a reason to think that I had been in there. When Robert came back home, he was immediately surprised to find his workroom door slightly ajar. He asked me if I had gone inside, and my heart skipped a beat, but I managed to keep my composure, shaking my head nonchalantly and pointing out that he must have forgotten to lock the door. Robert nodded, seemingly satisfied with my explanation, and didn't press the issue any further. That night, as I lay next to my husband in bed, the weight of what I had discovered earlier pressed down on me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to break down completely, to cry and scream, but I couldn't, since Robert was right there beside me. The man I had loved and trusted with all my heart suddenly seemed like someone I didn't know at all. It was as if all the love I had for him had drained away, replaced by a cold emptiness and a profound sense of betrayal. I couldn't believe that this was the same person I had planned to grow old with, the father of my child, the man I had always thought would be by my side no matter what. I knew I needed answers. I couldn't rest until I knew who this woman was and what she meant to Robert. So I decided that in the middle of the night, when I was sure Robert would be fast asleep, I would slip into the bathroom and call the number I had seen on his secret phone. I figured that if I called late enough, the woman would likely be asleep and I might be able to catch her voicemail. I hoped that her voicemail greeting would at least give me a clue, maybe even her name. I didn't know where this woman lived, but I was ready to take the gamble, driven by a desperate need to uncover the truth. As the hours passed and the house grew silent, I finally made my move. I quietly got out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest, and tiptoed to the bathroom. With trembling hands, I dialed the number from the photos I had taken earlier. My heart was racing as I waited for the call to go through, silently praying that she wouldn't pick up. I didn't know what I would do if she answered, but I was determined to follow through with my plan. The phone rang several times, each ring feeling like an eternity. Finally, the ringing stopped and I was greeted by a soft, sweet voice on the other end, a voicemail. The voice on the recording belonged to a woman named Mindy. She sounded young, cheerful even, and hearing her voice sent a fresh wave of pain crashing over me. My heart broke all over again as I realized that my husband was not just cheating on me, but with someone who was likely much younger. I stood there in the bathroom, clutching my phone, feeling utterly devastated. The reality of the situation was sinking in, and it was more painful than I had imagined. Robert, the man I had shared my life with, was living a double life with this woman named Mindy. He had built a relationship with her that was significant enough for her to consider him a father figure to her daughter. When I woke up the next morning, I made a conscious decision not to wallow in self-pity, but instead to take control of the situation. I needed to find out everything I could about this mystery woman, Mindy. My first step was to search through Robert's friend list on Facebook, hoping to find someone by the name. I scrolled through countless names and profiles, racking my brain to remember if Robert had ever mentioned a co-worker or friend named Mindy. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't recall him ever talking about anyone with that name. It was frustrating and disheartening, but I knew I couldn't stop there. Realizing that I wasn't getting anywhere with my online search, I decided to take a more direct approach. My emotions were running high, but I knew that if I was going to get any real answers, I had to confront Mindy directly. If she refused to tell me the truth, then I would have no choice but to confront Robert as a last resort. With a mix of determination and anxiety, I picked up my phone and dialed Mindy's number. And when she answered, I introduced myself as Robert's wife, trying to keep my voice steady and calm despite the nerves bubbling inside me. I asked her directly if she had been dating my husband, fully aware that she might not know about me or our marriage. As I spoke, I could sense her confusion and shock on the other end of the line. Mindy asked me to confirm again, clearly taken aback by what I had just said. I calmly explained that I had been married to Robert for the past 7 years and that we had a son together. The silence on the other end was deafening, and I could feel the tension growing as I waited for her response. I went on to tell her how I had discovered her messages on Robert's second phone, the one he had kept hidden from me and our family. I told her that I wanted to meet her in person so that we could get to the bottom of this, and I even offered to send her proof of our marriage certificate, family photos, anything that would show her that Robert and I were indeed married. After what felt like an eternity, Mindy finally spoke, her voice trembling as she asked me a question that made my heart stop. She asked if I knew that she had a daughter with my husband. I managed to ask her if it was really true, if Robert was really the father of her daughter. My voice was barely more than a whisper as I tried to wrap my mind around this devastating revelation. Mindy, her voice thick with emotion, began to tell me her side of the story. It was clear that she was just as shocked and devastated as I was. She explained that she and Robert had been dating for about a year when she discovered that she was pregnant. According to her, Robert had been the one to convince her to keep the child, promising that they would start a life together and that he would marry her soon. She trusted him completely, never suspecting anything was amiss, even when he would disappear for days, explaining that his job required him to frequently travel. As Mindy continued, she mentioned that she had always found it a bit odd that Robert didn't have any pictures on social media, which is true since Robert had no pictures of himself or of us on his Facebook account. Hence, she never had any reason to doubt him, let alone suspect that he had a wife and child at home. Mindy's voice trembled as she clarified that she would never have gotten involved with Robert if she had known he was a married man. She was horrified and disgusted by the truth, feeling betrayed not only on her own behalf but also on mine. As I listened to her story, I felt a profound sadness wash over me. I could hear the pain and confusion in Mindy's voice, mirroring my own. This was a woman who, like me, had placed her trust in Robert and had built her hopes and dreams around his promises. And just like me, she was now facing the harsh reality of his deception. I broke down completely, unable to hold back my tears any longer. The weight of it all was too much to bear, the betrayal, the lies, the destruction of everything I had believed in. On the other end of the line, I could hear Mindy crying too. It was a heartbreaking moment. We were strangers, yet we were connected in the most painful way imaginable. Mindy and I agreed to meet in person so that we could talk more about what had happened. There were still so many unanswered questions, and I needed to understand how Robert had managed to lead this double life. I knew that confronting Robert was inevitable, but before that, I needed to gather my strength and prepare myself for the difficult road ahead. That week, I came up with a plan, and I informed Robert that I had a sudden work trip that required my immediate attention. So he would have to stay back and look after our son. Initially, he was upset, mentioning that he also had a work trip coming up. I remained calm and told him that he needed to cancel his plans and take care of our son, explaining that I wouldn't be asking this of him if it wasn't important. Thankfully, he didn't push back or question me further, and I was able to proceed with my plan. With my heart heavy but determined, I flew down to meet Mindy behind his back. When I arrived in her city, Mindy and I spent an entire afternoon together, sharing our stories and piecing together the fragmented lives we had unknowingly been living. It was surreal, sitting across from this woman who considered my husband as her boyfriend. She showed me pictures of her daughter, a little girl who bore an uncanny resemblance to Robert. In turn, I shared photos of my family, of the life Robert and I had built together over the years. I won't go into the details of Mindy's life out of respect for her privacy, but it was clear from our conversation that we were both deeply hurt by Robert's betrayal. Hence, we came to a mutual decision. Neither of us wanted to continue a relationship with this deceitful man. The trust had been shattered beyond repair, and we both deserved better than to be involved with someone who could lie and manipulate us so thoroughly. As we talked, I shared my plan to confront Robert, laying out the steps I intended to take. Mindy was supportive and offered to help in any way she could. I asked her to send me all the photos and videos she had of Robert with her and her daughter, evidence that I could use when I finally confronted him. She agreed wholeheartedly. During our discussion, another disturbing detail came to light. Robert had been paying child support for Mindy's daughter. While I understood that supporting his child was the right thing to do, I was furious at the realization that Robert had been using me financially to fund his double life. As I mentioned earlier, I had always shouldered more of the financial burden around the house, believing that Robert's money was tight due to his obligations to his mother. Little did I know he was diverting funds to maintain this other life with Mindy and their daughter. The more we talked, the clearer it became that Robert had been using me for a long time. He had exploited my generosity, my trust, and my love to sustain his deceitful lifestyle. The anger and hurt I felt were overwhelming, but they also gave me strength. I was no longer the naive wife who had trusted him implicitly. I was now a woman ready to take back control of her life and expose the man who had wronged her so deeply. As I left Mindy that afternoon, I knew I finally had the evidence I needed to end my marriage with him. As soon as I got back home, I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. The betrayal was too fresh, too painful. I packed a bag for myself and one for my son, Mark, and made the decision to move out. I went to stay with my parents, needing their support and a place to regroup. Once I was settled at my parents' house, I told them everything, every detail of the heartache I was going through. They were supportive of my decision to get a divorce. Soon after, Robert started calling, trying to find out where Mark and I were. I answered his call with calm resolve, knowing that this was the moment I had been preparing for. I told him straightforwardly that I knew about his double life. His response was defensive. He demanded to know what I was talking about, and I informed him that I had spoken with Mindy and was leaving him. Robert's reaction was one of outrage and disbelief. He began yelling and insisting that I couldn't just leave him out of the blue and that I needed to give him a chance to explain himself. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. I asked him directly if it was false that he had a daughter with Mindy and was providing child support for her. I pressed further, asking if it was false that he had been having an affair with Mindy for a year. He suddenly had nothing to say, and I told him that his silence was confirmation enough. I did not just stop there. I decided to send out an email to every family member on Robert's side, as well as a few close family members from my own side. In the email, I detailed the whole situation, how Robert had been involved with a younger woman and had fathered a child with her. I attached pictures and videos that Mindy had sent me as proof, along with screenshots of the text messages I had taken from Robert's secret phone. I knew it would create a storm of reactions, but I felt it was necessary for the truth to be out in the open. It wasn't just about exposing Robert's betrayal. It was about reclaiming my own dignity and making sure that everyone involved had a full understanding of what had transpired between us. The fallout was swift and intense. Reactions from both sides of the family varied, ranging from shock and disbelief to anger and sympathy. Some were supportive, offering their help and understanding, while others were confused and angry. Some of his relatives even called him out for being a cheater, while a few of them urged me to sort it out with him and not break up the family. Robert has been calling me incessantly, accusing me of exposing his dirty laundry to everyone. AITA for exposing my husband's double life. Update 1. My mother-in-law just reached out to me a few minutes ago. At first, she seemed as stunned as I was about the revelations regarding her son. But it didn't take long for her reaction to shift dramatically. She began to blame me for exposing Robert, arguing that I should not let something like this break up our marriage. She reminded me of the vows I took when I married him, and she even mentioned that since Robert couldn't undo his mistakes, I should at least find it in my heart to forgive him and move on. She also had the audacity to say that despite his double life, Robert had always provided for me and our son. Listening to her words, I burst out laughing. I revealed to her that her son's contribution to our expenses was only 30%, and that I had been the primary provider for the lifestyle we had enjoyed. I told her in no uncertain terms that I did not forgive cheaters, and that she was welcome to take back her son and deal with him as she saw fit. I then hung up the phone on her as she continued to yell at me. Update 2. I realize it's been a few weeks since my last update, but I've been occupied with starting the divorce proceedings with my lawyer. Robert has tried to contact me multiple times, but I haven't answered his calls. At this point, there's nothing left for him to say. I do not wish to know what drove him to cheat on me. I do not wish to negotiate and discuss with a guy who betrayed me so deeply. I just want him out of my life. For those asking, I have no issue with my son continuing to have a relationship with Robert even after our divorce. However, I will be the primary caretaker and he will be living with me most of the time. Update 3. It's been 4 months since my last update. Robert and I are still in the process of getting a divorce and it hasn't been finalized yet. I'm determined to secure as much alimony as possible, given how unfairly he's treated me over the years. Mindy and I have continued to stay in touch over the months. True to her word, she ended her relationship with Robert and now only accepts child support from him. According to Mindy, Robert hasn't even visited his daughter in months, which is incredibly sad. In the future, if she decides to ever get back together with Robert, I have no issues with it. In fact, she or any other woman can have him. I'm done with that cheater. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships.